This is Becky Simmons, RIT Archivist. It's Brick City Weekend 2014, and one of the oral history interviews that we have been conducting this weekend. And this is
Bill Barley, class of 1964 in photographic illustration.
all right. Well, I'll just start asking some questions here. What years did you attend RIT?
Yeah. I think I got here in 1960 and graciously bid adieu in 1964.
And your major was
My major was photography in the illustration program.
the illustration
I
program.
finished up with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree.
Oh, you did get the BFA.
Yes.
So they were giving out BFAs then.
They'd started a couple of years previously.
Why did you choose RIT?
Well, that's an interesting story in itself. My original plan was to go to the University of North Carolina. I had had a mentor when I was in high school that had highly influenced me to go there, a reporter at the Charlotte News, because I was interested in journalism and photojournalism and active on the high school newspaper and working part-time for the newspapers in Charlotte, North Carolina, my hometown. I had this reporter there that kept pushing me to go to UNC Chapel Hill, a fellow by the name of Charles Kuralt. He was, you might say, my mentor for that. And that was Charles back when he had hair. But as I was coming along, I realized that the North Carolina program, while it was excellent in written journalism, was absolutely lame in photojournalism. Mm-hmm. And coincidentally, I had a close friend in high school who was a year behind me that was interested in going here too. We both found it. Back then there was no internet. The only thing you had were brochures and word of mouth. And you had to write off and pay money for the brochures. RIT didn't give them away. And anyhow, we discovered it. We had looked at a couple of different places and decided that RIT would be a good bet for our careers. I decided to go to UNC Charlotte for a year while I waited for David to graduate so we could go together. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And we filled out all the papers, did all the preliminary work. I had made arrangements with the registrar here that everything I took at UNC Charlotte would be transferable, so I didn't lose any credits. But I also didn't gain a year, so I was still looking at a 4-year program. Mm-hmm. And we came up here, I think it was around September 20th of 1960. It was a beautiful blue sky day, and then it got cloudy. We were unloading our worldly possessions into the old Nathaniel Rochester dorm over on Plymouth Avenue and Main Street. Somewhere along the line while we were unloading, it started raining, and then it turned to sleet. And before we knew it, there were snow flurries going by. And by late afternoon, the sun was out again and blue skies. Welcome to Rochester.
Right.
If you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, you'll get a new
As
version.
a southern boy, though, you must have been a little worried.
I was kind of shocked. And after a whole, coming up here for us, we had no preliminary visit. The only thing we had was what we knew from the brochures we had to buy from the admissions office.
How'd you find the campus? I mean, what did you think?
Well, you might say in the old Southern vernacular, we bought a pig and a poke. But it was an absolutely wonderful adventure for both of us.
Yeah.
David's parents brought us up in a old Chevy Nomad station wagon with a U-Haul trailer behind and put us out at the dorm, bid us farewell, and we were off on our freshman adventure.
Right.
And it was great.
Right.
Every damn bit of it.
Right. But the facilities were good. Your photo program.
The photo program was And I need to emphasize that, of course, at that time it was the old downtown campus, because Henrietta and the new campus was still 3-4 years over the horizon. The facilities were great. I can't say much about the annex building, but the Clark building was good. The Eastman building was an old creaky place, but it functioned. And
The photo was in the Eastman?
no, the photo was in the Clark
It
building.
was in the Clark, which was new in
Relatively
1950.
new. It was
I think it was
early
built-
50s building.
Yeah, early 50s.
And excellent facilities for the time. And we got started as freshmen. Both of us had been doing photography ever since junior high school. We thought we knew everything in the world we needed to know, that the professors should let us have free reign of whatever came to mind, and we rapidly found out that there was a curriculum to follow, and that perhaps the professors did know some things that we didn't know.
You
You
had
know,
a good group of professors at that point.
Yes, we did.
They were,
There was a guy named Leslie Strobel, who was our studio and beginning photography professor, and we learned a lot from him. He was a strict disciplinarian when it came to technique, and taught us a lot that we thought we knew, but we really didn't know. I'd say for the first 3 months, we were kind of feeling like we were constrained, but after that, and after the boot camp they put us through, we realized there were a lot of things to learn. And that criticism of our work was freely given. I've had my prints torn up and dropped in the trash can in front of me by Mr. Savage, the lab instructor.
wow.
And he would do it and look over and say, "Mr. Barley, you can do better than that. Show me something good." And he'd rip it up and drop it in the can.
Interesting.
Yeah. And freshman year was a great thing.
Yeah.
A great thing. We pledged to the fraternities.
So what fraternity did you join?
I pledged Sigma Pi. My roommate David Nance and my good friend pledged Phi Sigma Kappa.
Was one a photo fraternity? Or
No,
there
these
was
were
no-
these were just strictly social fraternities. Couple of interesting stories on that, if you don't mind me
no,
digressing.
we want stories.
They had a freshman orientation weekend. They had a freshman mixer dance, as they called it back then, and I walked in the old Ritter Clark gym, and the Maynard Ferguson Orchestra was playing. A big band jazz orchestra was playing. By God, I knew I'd come to the right place. And
Yeah, they used to get great.
and with that outfit there, I met a little girl from Oklahoma. She was off the Cherokee Reservation in Oklahoma, going to the School for American Craftsmen.
Oh.
And
What was her name?
I don't remember her name now, but she was part Cherokee Indian, part black. And we had a great evening together. It went no further than that, just people meeting each other, and we danced and talked and had a good time. I got back to my room, and my good, close as a brother roommate, Dave, was absolutely furious with me for talking to this black woman and refused to speak to me for about 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
But when
Different times.
he was a good Southern Baptist guy, and I would point out that we are still friends to today. I called him and wished him a happy birthday a couple of weeks ago.
He didn't want to come back?
But no, he took the 2-year program.
Oh, he was finished in
Yeah,
62.
he was 16. But then to show there were no hard feelings over my treatment about the freshman dance, when he came in from a rush for the fraternities, and this good Southern Baptist boy had never tasted alcohol before and kept trying to climb into the upper bunk and going blump, blump, blump down to the floor. I was a good guy, and I let him sleep in the bottom bunk, and I crawled up at the top. But the camaraderie of the freshman class was very close. Not just in our room because we were friends since high school, but within the whole group there in the Nathaniel Rochester dorm, where all freshmen had to do their first year, all freshmen men.
Well, it was a smaller school then.
Right, but there was people from all religions, all size towns, different countries. My people across the hall from me were a couple from Austria. There were all kinds of different people to meet that this white blood, blonde-haired Southern boy had never even conceived that could exist.
So you knew people from different programs,
Different programs, different races, different religions. It was a real mixing pot, but it
Great.
was a good mixing pot for everybody,
No, I think it's fabulous.
and it still is today.
Oh, yes.
Even more diverse than we ever had back then. But it's been outstanding through the years as bringing people and students from all over the world together. And I respect and admire that about the school to this day.
Yeah. No, there's a big focus here on diversity, and they really push it.
A thing I saw a couple of years ago at Innovation Weekend, I was up for that in May, and it was late in the afternoon, as the weekend was winding down. There was a soccer game going on one of the fields, and out by the edge of the field, across the fence from the game, several Muslim students had spread their blankets for evening prayers, and they were taking care of that obligation while the game was going on the other side of the fence. And as I stood there, another boy in a yarmulke came skateboarding down the street behind them. And that just was the perfect picture of how we put it all together and how there's hope for the world.
That's, yes. So you lived in the dorm. Any good stories from your dorm life? I think I've seen images of like watching movies downstairs.
We had in the old ballroom of the hotel.
Yeah.
We had movies on Saturday nights and Sunday afternoons, as if nobody had anything else to do. And I remember watching Butterfield 8 with Elizabeth Taylor down there for the first time in that. And of course, right around the corner at the entrance was the Alumni Relations Office, which was one whole office room and a small annex about the size of a large closet. And Steve Walls was the alumni director at the time.
He was the alumni director, but he became director of like student affairs or.
He may have been student affairs, but I think I remember as alumni director. But he was right there in the entranceway to.
And he
our
knew
comings
everybody.
And goings. He knew everybody,
Sort of
and
like
everybody connected with him.
Yeah, that's what we've heard.
He was gregarious, funny, but yet he did a good job for the school.
And did you know Mark Ellingson?
Yes, I did. I went to work on the Reporter at freshman year as a photographer, and then gradually worked myself up. And by my junior year, I became the editor of the Reporter. And at that time, the Reporter, unlike it is now, was the official publication of the school. It functioned on one week as a strictly student newspaper, and on alternate weeks, it was a combined alumni communication and student
I
newspaper.
didn't realize they alternated.
They alternated. And the circulation was about 18,000 copies on alumni weekends, and about 8,000 on student editions only.
So were you working with official school staff on this then? I mean, if you're the editor.
It was a curious arrangement for the Reporter back then, and I'll shed some light on it for the benefit of the ones now. The Reporter was the official publication of the university.
Right, I understood that.
And when I took over as reporter, Dr. Allinson called me in his office and explained the rules of the game. The rules of the game were to be as responsible as any commercial newspaper, e.g. the Democrat and Chronicle, to act like a professional newspaper, and to be able to back up any stories we ran with facts, same as a commercial newspaper. I could buy that. And he gave me a purchasing authority like any other department head. I could order supplies and all for the newspaper, just like any other department head could for theirs, without any counter signatures or anything. I just fill out a requisition, send it to central purchasing, and whatever we needed, hundreds of rolls of film, boxes of paper, arrived in a few days.
Impressive.
I have no idea where the bottom of our budget was. It just got done.
I love it.
And Dr. Ellenson never talked to me anymore about newspaper policy, even though once we ran a blockbuster issue, as we called it, on the use of the Ritter Clark ice rink. And we directly lambasted his wife for her controlling the schedule for the Genesee Valley Figure Skating Club. And cutting student time out, because then hockey games could not begin before 11 o'clock at night. When Genesee Valley Club was finished with theirs and the rink was regroomed, we would have our hockey games from around 11 at night to 1:30 in the morning, because we couldn't get the ice any sooner. So I kind of lambasted her about that. And you wonder how far you can stretch the permission of the editor. And I saw him in the hall the day after the edition came out, and he just looked over at me as I was going down the hall and kind of grinned and thumbed his finger thumbs up, and that was all that was ever said about it. Also, Dr. Ellenson, to talk about him, and he was much beloved by the students. He loved to come to the fraternity parties.
Really?
He had his own leader mug with Doc on it, and an RIT badge on the other side, like the fraternity drinking mugs. And he would go around to the fraternity parties at night, and of course we'd fill him up for free. We wouldn't charge him $5 for the party. But he would visit the fraternities.
Really?
I can remember him at the Sigma Pi house in the basement with his foot up on the bar, talking to us kids. He also had a penchant for Bermuda shorts and white socks with red garter things that held up the tabs that held up the socks.
Oh, Lord.
But we loved him to death. He was
Funny,
our
because I
kind
always
of people.
thought he was a sort of forbidding, formal person. You know, in all his images, he looks. I mean, he looks.
No, you're thinking of Dr. Simone.
Well, Dr. Simone,
Yeah.
he could be pretty silly. He had his.
I know he was.
had a
yeah,
silly side.
but he had a straight side too.
Yeah.
But,
Well,
but
I'm
Dr.
sure Mark
Ellenson,
Ellingson had a straight
he
side.
was a very dignified person. He was
Yeah.
very involved in trying to build up the
Oh,
university and
yeah,
move
he
it
was
forward.
active in the community. He was.
So
can't
he could
believe he had
wear
time to go
he could
to-
wear a suit and tie with the best of them. Mm-hmm. But with us kids, he could also relate to us on a level that we
great.
understood.
Now, would he ask you about school, or was he just there to
He
chat
would-
about movies and?
No, he'd ask us how we're doing in school. You know how I think he kind of like Harry Truman would like to go out and talk to his constituents and find out what was really going on out on the street.
I think it's smart.
Good man to do that.
Yeah. I don't know how much truth he was getting when it was primed with alcohol.
Well, probably more truth than if it wasn't primed. So,
True enough. Yes, it probably did loosen the tongues.
right.
Just wonder how the stories were exaggerated. Well,
Well,
I've never heard that.
I'd never heard an unkind word about the man in all
I've
the
never
years
heard
I
it.
was
I've
here.
never heard anything critical said about him.
No.
I mean, he was here 36 years. That's a long time.
And he wasn't just a placeholder. He moved it forward. This whole vision of the campus you're on now came out of his desire to move things forward. Of course, it was aided a little bit by the city and the New York State Thruway Authority, who told us somewhere around 1962 that they're putting an expressway through the middle of the Eastman building. So something had to be done. But it was a daring move to just tear it all up and start fresh out here in Henrietta rather than buy some land downtown and keep expanding in another direction on revised land.
Right.
So,
No, I think it, see what you see now.
yeah.
18,000 students, this enormous
Just
campus.
rebooted the whole purpose of the university.
So you're in a fraternity. Was there anything that you disliked about RIT, other than maybe the weather?
Well, the weather, but as a Southern boy, I got used to it because with my fraternity brothers, I picked up the sport of snow skiing. And we would sit there and look at the news reports on TV in the afternoon, see how it's going to turn out this weekend. Can we go to Whiteface Mountain? Can we go to Vermont? Can
Nice.
we?
You embraced it.
Yeah, we embraced it.
Wow, and then you drive off and
We'd
ski
drive
for
we'd
the weekend.
drive off and go skiing on Saturdays or Sundays at whichever place we could reach. We even went up one time to Montreal, Quebec, which is about 80 miles north of Montreal.
Yeah.
And we wanted to go so bad and none of us had a car, so we went out to Victory Auto Parts and we bought a 1951 Plymouth convertible for I think $75. And we decided we'd use it for the trip. If it got us up there and back, it would be worth the money we had pooled together to buy it. And off we went. One of our fraternity brothers knew a faculty member at some college in Montreal that we could borrow the use of a floor to sleep on Saturday night. And we made the trip. It was cold and snowing, and a spring broke, and we ripped a fence post out of a farmer's field and put up under it to hold the right rear end of the car up, and continued on the Montreal. The next morning, everything was very cold, and that heavyweight oil we had in the crankcase to keep the old worn-out motor running had turned to Jello. So we jacked the car up with the bumper jack and built a fire under the thing to warm the
Smart.
to warm the oil up so we could crank the car. Went on up and had 2 marvelous days of skiing in Montreal. And then Sunday night, the journey back to RIT for classes on Monday was epic.
And why was it epic?
As we got down toward Cornwall, it started raining and freezing rain. The roads got icy. The heater in the car would barely put out a warm breath, and we had to keep checking each other to make sure that we weren't getting frostbite on our feet, and we rotated between the front seat and the back seat every little bit to make sure our feet weren't frozen. Because the convertible had no window in the back because our skis were sticking out through the hole where the window was. And somehow we struggled through the night, got on to 81 South, coming down toward Syracuse, and the weather started clearing up, but the wind started blowing. And it carried the top away on the convertible. So it's flapping out behind us. And we were sitting there with just the ribs of the top on it. So we stopped. We'd freeze to death if we kept this up. And we pulled off the side of the road, and we used the laces from our ski boots to lace the top back on.
You were very resourceful. I really have to commend you in these.
Heck, we all had
gentlemen.
classes Monday morning. We had to get home.
Must have taken you a little bit longer than.
It did. We got in about first light that morning, about 7 o'clock or so.
Oh my gosh.
And we were so thankful to get back that we stopped up at there's a little Catholic church on Plymouth Avenue up above the school, and a couple of our fraternity brothers were devout. And we stopped in there to light a candle and give thanks. And this Presbyterian white bread from Charlotte, my good Jewish friend Dave Goodman from Philadelphia, went down there and knelt down, and we're glad to be there too.
What did you do with this car? Abandon it?
We gave it back to Victory Auto Parts. They wouldn't give us any money for it, but
No.
we couldn't leave it sitting out on the street here.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's a classic.
But life was an adventure.
Yes, we all were young and
Uh-huh.
had crazy times. Well, what did you do when you graduated? What was your career?
Now that was interesting. Like I say, I served about 1 2/3 terms as editor of the Reporter.
Right.
The editor, I was managing editor, and then the editor left school for some reason, and I inherited his term plus another year of my own. Mm-hmm. So I had a longer term at it than most, and it was.
Is it yours?
Well, and let's wait, let's kill it. Okay. Oh, excuse me. You can
It's
edit
not the
that
first
out.
time it's happened. It's
But the Reporter was a real educational project to me in itself, and that here I am managing about 30 people, a schedule that doesn't vary. Every Thursday it had to come out,
yeah.
rain or shine, and it taught me a lot about working with people, working with management, and everything like that. It was kind of like having a business administration degree on the side while you're trying to do your photo degree. But as the year was winding down, my senior year, 1964, and in the spring, I went down to Charlotte starting to look for a job. And I went to an event called the Southern Short Course in News Photography, which had been going on since the late 40s. And it was kind of a place where all people in photojournalism in the South came together. Mm-hmm. Later on, I was chairman of that same event for 2 different years. But at this point, I got word of mouth that the state newspaper in Columbia, South Carolina, was looking for some new photographers to try to upgrade their photo department. And I got the name that I needed to call and talked to him about it. He was the executive news editor. Interviewed successfully. Also, another RIT graduate from the previous year, Alan Cosgrove, had interviewed, and he got a job as a technical laboratory person to handle the color processing and color separation work for the newspaper. And they were still looking for a third photographer, so I talked to them about looking at my very best friend at the time from the class of '64, Gary Ludwig. And by this time, Gary had gone out to California and was in a miserable event photography job that wasn't going anywhere. This was probably a month after graduation. And they agreed, after I'd pre-sold him.
Keep going.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Okay. I'd agreed while they pre-sold him that he came up for an interview too, and they hired him. So we had 3 RIT graduates at the newspaper at the same time. And that's how I got into business. To wrap it up briefly then, we were about 18 months into our career at the newspaper, and it wasn't going well because here we had 3 young, smart aleck college students at a southern newspaper that had more tradition than use for us. So Gary and I got fired. It was a knockdown, drag-out firing. There were no repressed emotions by the time we went out the door. And on that day, we went downtown. We were thinking about going into business for ourselves, but not quite so abruptly. And we went downtown, called up a friend of ours that was a corporate communications director at a bank. He took us to lunch at the City Club, as it would be, the Palmetto Club for businessmen in Columbia. And we spent the afternoon panhandling around the tables in the men's bar looking for work. By about 3 o'clock, we had found a director at the State Development Board that was trying to produce a book. Talked to him about that. He invited us to pitch for it. The next morning, we went home and spent our evening writing up a formal proposal for it. And the next morning, we went back and pitched for the job, which was writing a book on South Carolina, a tourism book. And they had $12,000 in the budget, and that was in 1966. A wonderful find. I'd like to have it today, but then it was like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We pitched the thing. They bought our deal, gave me a chit to take down the hall to the state treasurer's office and exchange it for a $2,500 check, and we were in business. About 26 hours after we'd been booted out of the state record, we had our own business started, and we never looked back.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you stayed with this friend and
We worked together for about 8 years, and then he got more involved in advertising, creative services, and writing. And he left photography, even though he was a very good photographer. He left photography to go into advertising agency work and retired out of that as an agency creative director. And
but you kept the business.
I kept the business. It was a peaceful parting of the ways. I worked for him for a number of years doing photography for his agency. And to this day, we've still left on friendly terms.
Good. And are you retired now?
No, I am not retired now. I've reinvented myself one more time.
Why not?
Yeah. I've got more varieties right now than I got in a lifetime that'll do them in. But primarily now, I'm still shooting some commercial work. I did 3 assignments the week before I came up here for the weekend. But the principal work I'm doing now is G-clay reproduction, which is a fancy name for high-quality inkjet printing. And we provide services to artists, both for reproducing their artwork and graphic services for them, for their museum programs and exhibits and all. And
Very nice.
so that has been the bulk of the work. Along the way, I also became a pilot, as in flying airplanes. Jumped into that with an absolute enthusiasm. I've got about 4,000 hours as a pilot. I've got about 1,000 hours of instruction time as a airplane instructor and instrument and other flying. And I've done a lot of aerial photography too.
Oh, nice.
So it's been a diverse and wonderful career.
I guess so. It sounds fabulous.
To sum it up,
And you still have your career.
yes, I still have it, and I've still got things to do. But I would say in closing of this interview, if my horse fell dead in the road today, I'd say, Lord, thanks for a damn good ride. It's been great all the way.